Hey, I'm Sandro. Today I'm going to show you how I made this guitar. And I'm going to show you how I did it myself.
My goal of this project was to create the closest thing to an American-made Telecaster. I started this project off by mocking up the guitar that I wanted to build. The way I did this was using Fender's mod shop on their website. This is a great tool to actually build a guitar and customize it however you'd like. I knew from the beginning of this project that I wanted an exposed walnut body. Once the mock-up was done, I then ordered all the parts directly from Fender, except for the body, which I'll be making from scratch from this raw slab of walnut. I began by cutting the piece down to size and then tracing the template. Once this was done, I took it over to the bandsaw to roughly cut out the shape of the guitar. The goal here is not to be perfect, but to remove as much material as possible. Once I had the rough shape of the body, I then used double-sided tape to tape the template onto the wood. From here I used the flush trim bit in my router and followed the template to cut out the body. Now it's really important that you don't rush and take your time with this because you don't want your guitar... because you don't want this to happen. But no problem, this can be fixed with some glue and some patience. Before cleaning up the chipped edge with the router, I drilled out the screw holes for the neck. This time I took my time with the router. To fill in the remaining holes from the chip, I mixed together some wood glue and some walnut sawdust. This will help match the color as close as possible. Once this was dry, I then rounded over the edges of the guitar using a roundover bit. I then applied a second coat. The next step was to rout out all the cavities on the guitar. I did this by drawing out generally where they would go using the template, and then apply the template using double-sided tape. A caliper is a great tool to have during this part of the project. To make it easier on the router for the neck pocket, I used a Forstner bit to clean out as much material as I could. Once that was done, it was then time to rout out all the cavities. This is an important step because the cavities have to be the right depth in order to fit all of the electronics properly.
While I'm routing out all those cavities, I want to take some time to talk about the sponsor for this video.
Once the cavities were all routed out, I then moved on to drilling out the holes for the screws and for the strings. Unfortunately, my drill press wasn't deep enough to drill these holes, so I had to do them by hand. My best tip of advice if you're doing it by hand, drill straight. The next step was to drill out the input hole. And like I said before, drill straight. I then drilled the hole in the cavities to allow the wires to pass through. Once this was done, it was then time to get on to sanding and staining. I started with 120 grit sandpaper and worked my way up to 2000 grit. This took lots and lots and lots of elbow grease. And for the exciting part, I used tung oil to stain this guitar. The first 2 coats of tung oil that I applied, I actually used 2000 grit sandpaper to rub it in. I didn't want this guitar to be glossy but rather satin. I wanted the wood to be exposed and soft to the touch. The tongue oil really worked to make the walnut pop, and I was very satisfied with the outcome. After endless coats of tongue oil, the guitar was actually glossy. To achieve the satin look I was looking for, I used steel wool to buff out the glossiness from the tongue oil. The next stage in this project was to assemble the guitar. I started by screwing in the neck and the tuning pegs onto the neck as well. From here I then began assembling the pickups. And of course on Telecasters they're directly connected to the bridge and the pickguard. Once all the potentiometers and knobs and all of the shenanigans that go on there were connected, I then began to solder. I simply followed the wiring diagram that came with the pickups, and it seemed to work. Oh, and just a heads up, if you're ever making a Telecaster, this piece here sucks if you don't have the right tool to do it. Once everything was soldered, it was just a matter of screwing everything together and then stringing up the guitar.
This was a super fun build, also super damn garn Josh darn tricky, but it was definitely worth it in the end, and I hope you guys can learn from this, and as the guy from Daily Dose of Internet says,
I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Later!